what a lot of us have been through is that love and achievement have been not purposely, but they've been combined, and as a result, we think that love is achievement. We need to achieve to be loved. In the business that I'm in, one of the first questions I ask a lot of people is say, why do you want to invest in property? What are you looking to achieve by investing in property? And they say, I want freedom and all that. I say, why do you want freedom? And they say, because I want to be able to do all the great things I want to do. And I say, like what? We live in a society that creates a life by comparison rather than a life like as in by design, by what we actually want. I used to feel like the world was a war against me. This retreat for me, and I'm not exaggerating, was life-changing.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Mindful Creative Podcast. You have no idea how much it means to me that you are here listening to or watching this podcast on whatever platform you're on. Please, please, please do not forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment on whatever platform you're on as well. It massively helps me improve the reach of this podcast. And for now, enjoy the show and stay visionary. Shiv, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Welcome to the Mindful Creator Podcast. It's great to have you here. I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
No, thank you so much for the invite. Like when you said to me, do you want to do a podcast? I was like, oh, thank God. Finally, I'm somebody's asked me.
Someone finally wants to talk to you,
yeah,
bro.
Exactly.
This is it.
I was like, I see all these people doing podcasts. I'm like, okay, right now I can talk to someone about my experiences.
Hey, listen, bro, you were here 2 weeks ago recording. We all know. Look, I'm really looking forward to getting into this. And we're going to talk about a couple of different things around business, around life, around health, which are all aspects of things that you're super passionate about as well.
Yeah.
So what I really want to start with is just your journey around the business, specifically around lifestyle.
Yeah.
Lifestyle's been around for a while. And for those of you that don't know, Lifestyle is short for Lifestyle Property People, which is an investment company helping London investors or investors all around invest in property up north in the UK, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so why does it even exist?
Really?
What made you begin this whole journey?
Yeah, great question. I think ultimately when my wife and I got together, one of the first things that we realized about ourselves, you know, they say like they say opposites attract, but they also say that you should get with someone who has the same end goal as you. Yeah. And one of the things that we found out about ourselves is that we both wanted freedom. And freedom meant the freedom to live the life that you wanted to live, the freedom to not have to work 9 to 5. And when we eventually got into it, what that really looked like was having some recurring income that's paying us every single month, so we don't have to work a 9 to 5 job. And eventually we realized that a really great way of doing that is through property. So we started to look at investing in property. Now, we're from London originally, but as I'm sure a lot of people know, it's quite expensive to buy properties in London. So we started to look at around different cities, different areas. And we found that, to our surprise, actually, at the time, that properties in places like Leeds and Sheffield, where we now invest, are way cheaper than London. Like, I had no concept of this before I started.
Just for context,
yeah.
When you say way cheaper than London,
yeah.
Comparison wise, for like a 3-bedroom property in London versus...
Well, I tell you what, when we bought our first couple, which is like 2014, 2015 time, those properties in London would have been, I don't know, 550, 600 grand, something like that. Maybe 500, something like that. In Leeds, we were buying these for like 65, 70 grand.
That is huge.
Like it's less than the deposit that you would need for the London property. It's just insane. Okay. And we were like, hold on a second. So people rent these properties out. They live in these properties, and they pay really quite decent rent. So at the time, they were paying like £650 a month. Now those rents have obviously increased, so it's much more like 850, 950, 1,000 almost. But the point is that the prices were really, really quite cheap back then. And what we managed to do was we managed to buy properties, refurbish them, and then buy more properties and continue to do that over a period of a couple of years. And what we managed to do quite quickly was create enough income so that my wife Jana could leave her job. I'd already left my job at this point, so we were both kind of out of a job.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
And the bit there, which I think most people are going to be super curious about, is how did you manage to get yourself out of your job?
Yeah. Okay. So first question that people need to ask themselves is, well, how much are my expenses? Because people always think, oh, well, if I earn 50 grand a year, then I need to make 50 grand a year. You don't, because actually maybe your expenses are only 20 grand a year, 25 grand a year, whatever it might be. So let's say your expenses, just to make the maths easy, are 24 grand a year. That's 2 grand a month. So you say, great, I need to make 2 grand a month coming in every single month without fail from my rental income for me to be able to leave my job. That's as simple as it is. And when you look at each of these properties, they might have given us, say, £400-500 a month. So let's say £500 a month. £2,000 is what my expenses are. £500 per property. I need 4 properties to leave my job. It's really that simple. But when people when you work out the numbers, it's simple. When you sort of just think of it as a concept, it just sounds crazy because people don't do it. There's not a lot of people who are in that position that they're like, oh, right, I've quit my job. It's fine. It's easy. And I think it's just because where we live, the expectation is, and this is, I'm sure, you know, you've been traveling around the world as well. You know that this is not the expectation throughout the rest of the world. This is in the UK, specifically in London. It's like a rat race. We've all got to do better. I was saying to my wife on the way here, we earn 50 grand and we're like, oh, this is fantastic. And then the next year, 50 grand's not good enough for us. We've got to earn 100. And we earn 100 and we're like, oh, 100 is not good enough. We need to earn 200. And one year when it dips down to back to 50, you're like, but I still made 50. Like, you still made a lot more than most people in the UK make, way more than the average of the UK, but you're just not satisfied. And it's just a game of levels, ultimately.
Where do you think that mentality comes from, and why do you think people are chasing that level of, like, okay, 50 grand was amazing the first year, and now it's no longer enough, so you have to go for the promotion, you have to go for the bonus, you have to get that extra sale? Like, why do you think people are stuck to that addiction of trying to chase more?
It's because we live in a society that is that creates a life by comparison rather than a life, like, as in by design, by what we actually want. And people don't think about what they want to do with their life. They think, well, what's Dipesh doing? Oh, great, let me go and do that. So I think a lot of people, I mean, if you even think about the jobs that we have, a lot of people end up in, like, I don't know, accounting or finance or something like that. But why do people end up in those kind of jobs? Because they've seen other people that end up in those jobs and they have a lot more money. And I tell you what, in the business that I'm in, one of the first questions I ask a lot of people is, say, why do you want to invest in property? What are you looking to achieve by investing in property? And they say, oh, I want freedom and all that. I say, why do you want freedom? And they say, because I want to be able to do all the great things I want to do. And I say, like what? And then there's silence. Because no one's thought that far ahead. Everyone knows they want freedom, but they don't know what they want to do with their life and their time after freedom. And this is exactly my point. Like, people don't think things through. They just have seen, like, okay, I want this concept called freedom because I think it would be nice to have it. And just like I said before about, like, actually calculating what the numbers are and then realizing you can actually get there if you start to put your mind to it. This is the same thing. Like, if you actually understand what it is that you want, you'll be much, much happier. You'll be much more fulfilled than just following what society is telling us to do. You know, why do most people want to drive a Bentley? Because somehow society has told you that Bentleys are great cars, and because they're expensive. They don't even look that nice if you really think about them.
Apologies to all the Bentley lovers out there.
The people that love Bentleys, they love Bentleys because society tells us that Bentleys are nice cars. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is that, I mean, just think about Bentley and a Ferrari, completely different cars, but people can love them both. How can you love two things that are completely different? If I like this, and this is the model, and this is the design that I like, then I can't also like a design that's completely the opposite of the design that I like. It would be quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think something that you've touched on there is super important, which, like, it's up to people if they want to change that about themselves. But essentially, our association to what we perceive is something worth having based on what we've seen someone else achieve is creating, from my understanding, this false sense of needing to chase that because we believe it's valuable. Because let's just say you've got a Lamborghini parked outside, and I see a Lamborghini, and I'm like, okay, now I need to get a Lamborghini because Shiv's got a Lamborghini. Now I'm chasing a Lamborghini. I'm no longer chasing my freedom.
Totally. And I think that actually what we should be chasing is things like growth in ourselves rather than chasing Lamborghinis. Because what's going to happen once you've got the Lamborghini? Okay, great, I got the Lamborghini. I want another Lamborghini. I want 3 Ferraris. I want more of that kind of stuff. It's all material stuff, but there's no end to those levels. Just like there's no end to growth. But actually with growth, you're actually moving in a direction. You're becoming a better person. And that's why if you look at, and I'm sure you've interviewed loads of, like, business owners. Business owners say, the reason I'm doing this is not to make more money necessarily. The reason I'm doing this is so that I can become a better person. So I can become the person that I'm meant to be, the best version of myself. And I was talking to my wife on the way here about this, exactly this, and we were saying how your money is just the way of keeping score. Just like when you play football, goals are the way of keeping score. Otherwise, we wouldn't know who's better and who's doing well.
Yep.
If you score 10 goals in one match, you're a really good football player because you've done really, really well. You scored 10 goals. It's the same as if you make 100 grand or £1,000,000. It's just a way of keeping score. But it's once you've hit, we all know this, like once you've hit like 70 grand income, the rest of it is irrelevant. With 70 grand, 100 grand or something like that, you can pretty much live any life you want to live. You can do anything you want to do pretty much. So after that, it doesn't really add to your happiness. After that, it's just bloating your ego.
Okay, so money's the score
Yeah.
to figure out who's winning at the game of business,
Yeah.
right? What then do you think is the score that considers you winning at life?
I'll just touch on one thing. You said it considers who's winning in the game of the business. Actually, it considers how you're doing compared to yourself, because there is no, you're not competing with other people. Everyone's got a completely different business to you, and they have different challenges to you. And we all know, like on social media, when you look at other people doing really, really well, they're just showing their highlight reels. They're not showing any of the hard things that are happening, the bad things that are happening. So actually, your only thing that you know about, the only thing you're certain about is your own life and your own capabilities. So you'll compete with yourself. So how do you keep score in life? I think, you know, like you said at the beginning of this podcast, health. So what are your values? That's what I think it comes down to. And my values are my relationships, it's a connection, my relationships, health, and financial security. Those are the three things that I like value above all else. And so I'm looking at doing better in each of those three areas and growing in each of those three areas. So when I think about keeping score, I think about, have I grown compared to last year in each of these three areas? And if I've grown, then I think, oh, great, this is a good year. This is the direction I'm moving in. And if I haven't grown and I've stagnated, then I think, oh gosh, like that was a waste of a year. And a friend of mine actually says, generally speaking, we only get about 80 years on this planet. Hopefully, fingers crossed. 80 years, that's 80 chapters of a book. That means that every chapter needs to mean something. You can't go through a year and have achieved nothing or have done nothing with your life. Like if you can't remember what you did in that year, then and I think for a lot of people, and I remember being in the same boat, for a lot of people, they'll go through a whole year of work or 5 years of work, and they won't be able to differentiate between any of those years. There'll just be 5 years that I worked during those years. But you and I know that we're not going to remember work when we're lying on our deathbed. We're going to remember all the things that we did, all the amazing experiences that we had. So I think one thing that's really important is to make sure that we, this is the whole thing about thinking things through. Create a bucket list and then start putting that into your plan. So yeah, you can still work, but you say, okay, cool, every year I'm going to do one of the things from my bucket list, so that when you are lying on your deathbed, you can say, oh yeah, that was the year I did this. That was the year I did this. We talked this just outside about, this was the year that I ran the New York Marathon.
Yeah.
My first ever marathon. I loved it. And in the chapter of my book, the title of this chapter will be the year I ran the marathon.
Do you think about death a lot?
I think about time a lot. I don't necessarily think about death a lot. I think about time. I think about the temporariness of things. I was in the shower the other day, as we have great thoughts in the shower.
Just a cut scene of Shiv in the shower.
We have great thoughts in the shower, but I was thinking about how everything is temporary. I was thinking about how the connections that I have right now, my friendship with you, for example, if I moved to a different location, if I moved to America, for example, no doubt our connection would be weaker, and eventually it may even fizzle out. And this would be the same as, for example, my connection with, I don't know, my parents, for example, because at some point they're going to pass away. My connection with them will fizzle out. All of the connections that I have in this entire world, all the ones that are physical, all the ones that are emotional and everything like that, everything at one point is going to go away. I'm not going to be here at one point. So that means that there is no point in going back to your point about, as you think about death, it's not death, it's more the time that I have available. There's no point in dilly-dallying. Like, there's so much stuff that we've got to get done. There's so much of the world that I want to see. And we all know that there is never enough time. So therefore, you can't do everything, but you can do anything. So you really have to like focus on what do you actually want to do, and then go out and do those things. Yeah.
So for anyone listening that is feeling stuck or lost or unsure because they're trying to make the right decision of what's the thing that they should be focusing on, as someone who's been able to take themselves out of their job and create that freedom for themselves and, you know, for your family, essentially, which is amazing, what advice would you give for someone who's wanting to explore something that maybe has a bit more purpose to them, that they can utilize their time for in a more productive way?
I think the first thing is that you have to know what your values are. You have to know what's important to you. I've just said to you, these are my 3 values, because I know that I can do things that are in line with those values. If you don't know what your values are, you will follow the crowd. You'll follow society, whatever the society tells you to do. If you know your values, then you can start to explore roles and jobs and work and missions that align with those values. And if you do things that align with your values, you're going to be happier. And, it does come down to what's the purpose of life. So this is my simple mind, and this, because I have different values from everyone else, this is going to be different for everyone else. I think to myself, okay, purpose of life is, let's just say, happiness.
Okay.
And what I call it is like contentness, peace. Is that, I used to ask myself, when we first met 5-10 years ago, I used to ask myself the question, what do I want in life? And the answer that always used to come to my mind, this is not one that I thought of, this is one that just came to me. I always used to think peace. I never used to understand what that meant. I used to think peace. Now that I am a little bit older, a bit more mature, what I understand that to be is I want to not worry about stuff. And maybe because at that time I was always worried about everything. I was, oh my God, we need to do all these kind of things. Like, how do I make sure that my life is stable? Now the way that I understand to achieve that peace, that contentment, is by developing skills. It's not by having an easier life. It's by developing skills, which means that the smaller problems in your life don't worry you anymore. And you'll see this if you ever start to build a team. You'll see that there's people in your teams who worry about stuff that you used to worry about 5 years ago, but now you don't worry about it because you've been through that process. You've solved those problems, so they worry about it. And as soon as they worry about it, they go, "Oh my God, we've got a big problem." And you go, "Calm down. Tell me the issues." And they tell you the issue, and you go, "Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm a little bit worried about it, but I'm a level 2 out of 10 worried about it, where they're like a level 8 out of 10 worried about it." I used to be at one point a level 8 out of 10, but I've worked through that. I'm now at the next level. So life is about going from level to level in terms of your competence, in terms of the things that have to go wrong for you to worry. I'll give you a really great example. And this is, I always use this example, and everyone tells me it's a silly example. You shouldn't use this.
I'm all up for silly examples.
Here we go.
Let's do it.
When you don't have a huge amount of money, and when you're new into the world, like you just graduated or whatever, and you learn how to drive or whatever, and you get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, you go, "Oh my God, I've got this parking ticket, I've got a speeding ticket. Like, what am I going to do? It's my first one. This is crazy. I'm gonna, the whole thing's gonna be bad. I'm gonna get 3 points, all that kind of stuff." But then eventually, after you've kind of like been through the world a bit more, been through the process, you go, "Cool, I've got a parking ticket. It cost me 60 quid. I'll pay the fine. I'll pay 60 quid. I'll move on with my life." There's no point in me dwelling on this for 3 days. Like, "Oh my God, why did I park there? I shouldn't have parked there. How did the guy even spot me? Where did he come from? I didn't see him. What's going on?" We don't need to waste our time with small things like that. We just go, actually, just pay the fine. Let's move on, because life's too short to worry about things like that. So it's a bad example because it's parking ticket. We shouldn't get parking tickets in the first place.
And also, if you suffer from road rage, you're going to have more of an issue with parking tickets and stuff anyway. So
yeah, totally. But I think, in fact, and one of the important things I think that I've learned in terms of like skills that we should have is, talking about road rage, is emotional intelligence, like keeping yourself under wraps. If you suffer from road rage, that basically means that your emotions have control over you rather than you have control over your emotions. And one thing that I say to my team all the time is, the person, I think you were in the same training course as me, that you might have heard this, the person who has the most emotional flexibility is a person that will always win. Anything,
100%.
Any argument, any conversation, person who has the most emotional flexibility is the person that will win. And I think we always talk about IQ. Everyone talks about IQ. How well did you know your GCSEs, your A levels, and your uni, and whatever. No one talks about EQ. It's so important. It is probably more important than your IQ. When we hire people in our business, we don't necessarily hire for IQ. We don't even hire for experience. We hire for EQ first, emotional quotient. So like how emotionally intelligent you are, and how much you fit the team, and then we can train you up on all the rest of the stuff.
So, who you are to your team is someone who can bring that perspective of, okay, you're panicking about this, here's how we can solve that issue.
Yeah, I'd like to think it's a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So who is yours? And how did you pick your coach or coaches to help you get to the level of certainty that you have to help your team grow just as they've helped you?
this is a perfect question, because one of the first things I thought about when we started this conversation is I need to make sure that people realize, and I say this all the time, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And one of the first things that I did at the sort of time that I met you was, and honestly, this was like by accident we did this, is we found a mastermind group, because we were looking at kind of like, okay, we stagnated a bit. We need to level up. How do we do this? We need to surround ourselves with the right people. Who are the right people? We found a mastermind group that we paid a huge amount of money, like eye-watering amount of money, to be part of. The reason why we did that is because the people that were in that group were way above our level. So we said, we're going to pay this money, and we're going to be part of this group. And to this day, being part of that group has helped us navigate every challenge in business. And the reason why is because being in business is a lonely journey. There's going to be challenges that are thrown at you that you don't know how to solve. And every challenge is going to be new. So every challenge you're going to be like, oh my God, what do I do? If you surround yourself with people that have been there and done that, they can be your coach, and they can be like, don't worry, we've been there, we've done that. You know, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to solve that problem.
Okay, so there are a lot of people out there doing mentoring for business, for property, for lifestyle, for health, and so many different things.
Yeah.
How do you distill from all the noise that's out there, the group, the environment, the mentors that are actually the ones worth listening to?
It's the same way that you distill who your friends are. It's your values. If your values align, it means that you're heading in the same direction. So, for example, in the property world, there is a company that does property training, and they are very well known for being very like hard sell, brash. They'll just go out in there and do everything. They're go-getters, for example. There's another company on the other side of the equation who are much softly, and they're really like moral compass. They're like good people. They do the right thing. And you could be this, or you could be this. None of them is right or wrong. These people attract their own audience, and these people also attract their own audience. And then what I found was this group in the middle, which is they're a bit of both. They're a bit of go-getters, but they like to do the right thing. They don't want to screw people over, but we need to ultimately be like moving forward. So those people matched my my values. And when I look at them now, and I look around at the people that I surround myself with, we all have, when I say these are my values, we all have very, very similar values. We all have importance on health, like massive importance on health. We all have importance on our relationship with our partners, like specifically your husband-wife relationship, or any other genders. And we also have massive importance on doing well financially, because that's the way we keep score. And I say well financially, what I really mean is like continuing to grow our business, because by definition that grows ourselves and who we are. So it's growth, it's relationships, and it's health. Like these are the 3 main ones that I find. And actually, I keep meeting people, and I keep thinking, oh, right, everyone that I meet who's a good person has these same 3 values. Now, is this just my own bias? Is it that people that I meet have these same values, or is it just the people that I remember are the people that have the people that I acknowledge are the people that have these values? You know, they say you create a reality, and my reality is filled with people that have the same values as I do.
I love that. So what else do you do practically on a daily basis or weekly that helps you forge and create your own reality exactly how you want it by design?
Yeah, okay, really good question. I think one of the things I know about me, and it's probably the same with everyone that's listening to this podcast, is when I don't prime myself to be a loving, abundant person.
Okay, before you carry on, define priming yourself.
Okay, when I don't define priming myself. Imagine it's as simple as when I don't wake up in the morning and tell myself, okay, you need to be loving and abundant, then I default into being a person that gets on and does stuff. I just do stuff. But I don't want to be the person that just does stuff. I want to do good. So I've got to get up, and I've got to somehow get the message into my brain that we're not here just to do stuff, because if you give me a to-do list, I'm really good at doing to-do lists. But we're not here just to do stuff. We're here to do good stuff, and we're here to spread good vibes. And so every morning I wake up, and I'm sure I guarantee, and again, the same thing. When I speak to people, a lot of people that I speak to do the exact same thing. I read one page of the Daily Stoic. It's a really great book by a guy called Ryan Holiday.
Yep.
And every morning it just teaches me how to behave and how to not let the world get me. I said to you, you know, back in the day, I used to just feel like we were in survival mode. Like the world, I used to feel like the world was a war against me. And over time, my mind's changed and it's saying, oh, it's not a war anymore. We're not in survival mode. This is our universe that we can create however we want to create it. And actually, therefore, the world is your oyster. We hear that all the time, but you can make it whatever you want to make it. Imagine instead of being a war that's against you, this is now a universe that's for you.
Where did you get that awareness from?
I think in my earliest or earlier memories, I remember when I was first started at work, 21, 22 years old, I got really, really interested in the universe. I don't know why, like space and the universe. And back in those days, you know, TikTok wasn't around. So I'm sitting on YouTube and until like 4 a.m, and I'm just watching, I'm just like mesmerized by like the universe and stars and black holes. And I had no idea what all this was about. And then that then led me into the realm of spirituality, and I listened to, there was a bit in the middle as well that was like more go-gettery stuff that was like motivational videos and things like that. But then eventually I then got into like spirituality, and I listened to Alan Watts a lot. I listened to a lot of these people that talk about how to be a good person, because like I said, we're not just here to be a person, we're here to be a person, to spread good vibes, to have good impact on our environment. So again, like when you asked, what do you do practically? What do you do daily? Like literally wake up, watch a YouTube video, primes me to get into this mode. Another example would be like when I'm feeling stressed, I get up, get my YouTube up, and I watched a YouTube video. And it's obviously like, how did you find this YouTube video? I just searched and I kept searching until I found the one that just really works for me. There's this one video, it's a meditation by a lady called Sarah Blondin. It's called Learning to Surrender or something like that. And it basically talks you through this surrender. It says just surrender, like just realize that you're not in control of this world. And actually the world is acting for you. So all of these messages from all these different places have come together and have created like what my world outlook is right now. So I think that's where it came from.
Awesome. I'm about to get deeply philosophical with you before we move it back to property.
Yeah.
So you said the word like good vibes, being a good person, like essentially doing the best you can to define like how you see yourself in the world, right?
Yeah.
How do you define what's good?
I think internally, innately, we all know what's good and what's bad. I don't think there's and perhaps there's also worth saying like, maybe what's good to me is bad to you. I don't know. But I think internally, morally, we all kind of have a compass. I think one of the defining thoughts I've had or I've got from somewhere is that when I'm not Shiv, I'm not this bag of bones and skin. And you're not Dipesh's bag of bones and skin. Like we're somehow connected. And I think this comes into somewhere I got into when I got into space. I got into quantum theory. And quantum theory basically says, in the simplest form, this is not quantum theory, but in the simplest form, you're made of atoms, I'm made of atoms.
Yep.
This table in front of us is made of atoms, this microphone is made of atoms. Okay, but if we're all made of the same atoms, then like how are you different from me, and how am I different from the table? Like we're all just the same thing. But I've manifested myself as this guy called Shiv, and you've manifested yourself as this guy called Dipesh. And so we're all connected. And I think when we talk about doing good, I think it really comes down to, well, we're all connected. You know, this golden rule that we used to learn in religious education, where we used to have, you say, do unto others as you want to have done unto yourself. It's all about, like, we're all connected. So make sure that the things that you're, not only make sure the things that you're doing have a positive impact, but realize that if you do things that have a negative impact, it's going to come back and bite you. Because if you imagine we're all connected, that means that I'm atoms, you're atoms. If I do something that's going to hurt your atoms, they're going to hurt my atoms. We're all atoms. It's the same atoms. So I think the whole point was that because we're connected, I can't do stuff that I believe is bad, because it's just going to hurt me. Even though outwardly, if I think of myself as this individual called Shiv and you think of yourself as the individual called Dipesh, then by definition you don't really necessarily care what happens to me and I don't care what happens to you, because we're two separate things. But if we're the same thing, it's like my left hand and my right arm. I'm not going to go and cut my left hand, am I? Because it's going to hurt me. It's not hurting anyone else. It's hurting me. So I think that's really an important lesson that I learned somewhere along the way.
It's super interesting, because my perception on and my experience on this is good and bad don't actually exist, but your perception of something will make it good or bad.
Yeah.
And then because that I believe is true, then it comes down to you could have done good for someone, but they'll see it as bad.
Yeah.
So I think then it comes down to what intention did you have behind the action?
Yeah.
And then actually how someone else responds to it is no longer your responsibility.
This is a really interesting concept, because I talk about on one side terrorists, on the other side freedom fighters. Everyone thinks that they're a good person. Everyone thinks they're the hero. No one thinks of themselves, I'm the bad person, I'm the terrorist. When terrorists don't think of themselves as terrorists, they think of themselves as freedom fighters. They're fighting for freedom, for a cause. Yeah, exactly. So exactly what you're saying, like there's no good or bad. It is ultimately like what we think about it. And I think you're right. Like the intention is probably the thing that matters. Is what is our intention? And I think by reading the stuff that I'm reading and looking at the stuff that I'm looking at, I think the intention is for let's just call it a positive intention. And as a result of being positive intention, I'm hoping that the vibes I'm putting out are also positive.
What's been one of the most impactful books that you've been reading around this subject that someone else could delve into?
I don't know who your audience is specifically, but a book that I'm reading right now is called what's it called? So I've never been into, I should say, I've never been into like religion. Never really got into any of that stuff. I've never, even, faith, religion, even religious books and stuff. I was never into it. Anyway, I'm reading something called the Bhagavad Gita, but it's basically someone's read it and they tell you the verses and then they explain the verses.
Okay.
And it's a guy called Eknath Iswaran or something like that.
Okay.
And I'm reading through it and it is mind-blowing. I've read it before as well. It's the second time around. It's mind-blowing because this is effectively, Bhagavad Gita, people know it's the Hindu holy book written I was going to say decades ago, but a bit longer than that.
Like 30 years ago.
Written a while ago. And there's so much wisdom in those texts, in those books from so long ago. And when I read it, of course, when I read it as well, I don't read it as the person who wrote it. I read it as how I'm taking it in. So I'm reading it and it says, I suppose that it helps me to confirm that we're all connected. It helps me to realize that when we talk about, the people that don't know the Bhagavad Gita, it's a story of like good against evil or whatever. And the guy who's explaining it says it's not good versus evil, like as you would see it, two people, one's good, one's evil. It's the good inside you versus the evil inside you. And we all know this. Like, I know there's parts of me that are really good, and I know there's parts of me that are probably not so good. And it's the war of the good inside me over the evil inside me. Like you said, the good intentions over the evil intentions. But that's one book that I'm reading right now, which is, it's really like mind blowing because it's on a different level. I've been used to operating on, let's call it like earthly level, where we're looking at, getting money and stuff. And if you want to do that, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, best book, plug
I knew you were going to say that.
Plug for him. It just changed my life. At the time, a little side story. At the time, I used to have an Audi TT, and it was, oh my God, the best car. I love this car. I said to myself, when I say to myself all the time, I'm going to buy this car again. This is like Mark 1, like the oldest one. Best car ever.
I remember when you sold it.
Yeah. Well, it's because I read this book, and the book said assets, because I thought my car was an asset. It said assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take money out your pocket. And I was like, well, my car isn't putting a huge amount of money in my pocket at all, actually. It's just taking money, I remember having to change my tyres every year. It's like £600 worth of tyres every single year. So I was like, right, hold on a second. This is a liability. And so we went ahead, I sold my car, and I was definitely broken up about it. But ultimately, we took some of that money and we invested in property, and property goes up in value and puts money into your pocket. I was like, oh my God, it was a revelation. Anyway, it's a side point, but I just want to tell you how much I love that car, basically. That was the point of that story.
That's probably the most important part of this entire conversation.
Exactly. Oh, beauty. I still have that picture, Wow, God. Yeah.
Definitely to get the car back. So going back to property, there is so much information out there around property, around investments, different strategies. There's HMOs, there's buy-to-lets, there's service accommodation.
Yeah.
You can do rent to rent, you can do flips. There's literally an endless number of strategies you could implement. What are some of the biggest myths that you've had to maybe find out the hard way around property?
Yeah.
And even educate your investors on, which they thought that they were going to get into something for a specific reason, and then you have to kind of reveal that veil of truth.
I think that people always think like this property strategy is better, or this one is better, or this one is better. Just like people think, oh, well, property is better than the stock market, or whatever it might be. The fact of the matter is that I love this quote: the grass is greener
where you water it.
Where you water it. The grass is greener where you water it. So if you have a...
I'm so glad I got that right, by the way.
Yeah. You'd have to cut it otherwise. But, people say, oh, where's the best, place to invest and whatever. The fact is, I can't read the future. You can't read it. No one can read the future. We don't know. Maybe Bentley, go back to Bentley, is going to set up a new, factory in Leeds. If so, brilliant. If they don't, then not so good. But the grass is greener where you water it. And so what you need to do is go out there and water the grass. And where you water it, if you do, the buy-to-let strategy, for example, and you actually put effort into that strategy, you're going to get good deals there. If you put effort into the service accommodation strategy, you're going to get good deals there. So ultimately, it comes down to where you're going to be willing to put your effort in. I think that's the biggest myth, is that there is this perfect thing. Just like with, what's going to make me a millionaire quicker? Is it going to be property, or is it going to be the stock market? Wherever you water it, that's what's going to make you a millionaire. And I think that going back to the values that we talked about earlier, and we talked about how do you choose your line of work? Well, choose it around the values that you have. If you choose your work around the skills that you have and the things that are important to you, you'll never go wrong. Steve Jobs, if you remember, said that really great quote. He said, if you don't love what you do, you'd have quit ages ago. Entrepreneurs just need to love what they do, because it's so hard.
Yeah.
That you've got to, even when it gets really hard, you're just going to keep doing it, because and you're not doing it because you love it. You're not doing it because you're getting so much pleasure from it. You're doing it because this is a mission. You're going way past any normal person. And I think that that's the key here. Like, you've got to find something that you really enjoy. When we started doing the property strategy, one of the way that I started finding good deals was, as you can tell by this podcast, I talk a lot. So I'm a people person, and I like to meet people and whatever. Yep. So the way that I did it was to go around and build relationships with agents. That's not necessarily the way for everybody, because you've got to look at what your skill set. And, some people are like, oh God, I hate talking to people. Great. Don't do that strategy then. Like, still do buy-to-lets, but you can do it in a different way. Don't do it the way that I did it. But you've got to find out what your skill set is. What's they call it your internal values and your external values. Your internal values is what drives you, and your external values are what are your gifts, like what you're good at doing, your skills. And when you put those two things together, then you can start to really bend the world to your will, because you can start to do things that not only progress you in terms of whether it's financially or otherwise, but also feel really good. Like, you're like, oh my God, like, I actually get paid for doing this. This is crazy. In the early days of looking for properties, I mean, people would be surprised now to hear that, I basically went up to Leeds, lived in a HMO, £300 a month, and went out basically 5 or 6 days a week, going to speak to agents all day, doing viewings, smelly properties, cobwebs everywhere.
Yeah.
I loved it. I often, even now, I reminisce with my wife. I'm like, do you remember that time we bought a little smart car? She used to drive down, go to the viewings, do the viewings, come back. She'd give me the numbers. I do the numbers. I go.
You used to drive around in a little smart car. I like it.
No, she's got a new car now. She's got a Mini now. Electric Mini.
Not yet.
Next month it's coming.
It's on its way. On its way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
But it like, and I think that people forget that those are the times that you're going to remember.
Yeah.
So people are so eager. I was the same. I was really eager to get out of that place, because it was like, I want to be rich. I want to have money. I want to be able to be comfortable. Let's just say. But when I look back on it, I'm like, they were good times, And what people forget,
it's the start of the journey, right?
There's another great saying, says, how you live your days is, of course, how you live your life. Because everything that you do is the thing that's making up your life. Life's not the thing that's going to happen to you in 10 years from now. Life is what's happening to you right now. We're having this podcast right now. This is my life. This is your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about sometimes. This is the first podcast I'm doing in a studio.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about as well, because and I guess this is a testament to what you guys have been able to build over the last few years as well, which is what your company is today is not what it was when it started.
Yeah.
Yeah. From when you were going around 4 or 5 days a week, speaking to agents, going to view properties, doing all of that stuff, to now having a team to be able to do all of that for you, and you having been able to remove yourself from that position is progress. I remember the first podcast I ever did was just audio.
Yeah.
Then I took a SLR camera somewhere, created the absolute shittest video I think I've ever created in my life. Then it was on Zoom, and now we're in a studio. So like, you know, it's progress, it's steps, it's always one thing at a time. But when I look back on it, I loved doing that first podcast. Like, it was great. And just like you loved going to the first property.
I think the other thing is, you know, we say it's progress, which is completely true. Of course it's progress. But I think we need to maybe, I'm just thinking this out loud now, so it might not come out right, but maybe we need to stop thinking of it as like, this was the stepping stone that got me to this level. Then they got to this level. Maybe it got to this level. Maybe what we need to think about is the fact that every day we live our life is just a day that we live our life. And, you know, is what I'm doing today better than what I was doing then? No, it's just different. It's not better. It's just different to what I was doing then. I'm building different skills to what I was building at that time. That was a day in my life. This is a day in my life. They're both the days in my life. And I think that, I haven't mastered this at all. But people say, if you can exert your effort without actually worrying about the end goal, then you're going to be much happier, because you're just going through life, living life, expending your effort, and enjoying yourself, rather than waiting to achieve something. And I think that's a good thought, hopefully.
No, I love it. I feel like I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Expand so that your listeners understand as well.
Essentially what you're saying there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but instead of trying to worry about, I've got this stepping stone, I've got this milestone to hit, and essentially then chasing something, you choose to focus the energy on just doing the best you can in today.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't know if this was the same for you, but I remember thinking that achievement is the purpose of the things that we're doing. So when you are at sports day and you run the race, and you know, you get first place, second place, third place, whatever it is, and my mum used to say to me, "Oh my God, well done, you got a second place or third place," or whatever it was. I thought the point of running the race was to get the medal, but the point of running the race is to be able to run the race. Like, can you imagine that we get to run a race in the sunshine and have this great experience? Like, I think we don't understand that enough, like that we actually get to do these things.
See, this is something I struggle with, and I'm sure people listening with will struggle with a lot, because my head is always geared around, I have to win.
Yeah.
And because I have to win, then the default reaction is, how can I do better than yesterday? Which, I guess it's looking for that marginal gain. It's looking for that opportunity to do better. Like, if you saw 5 properties yesterday, can you see 6 today?
Which is a great trait, right? Because that leads to a successful life in society's world. You end up with more money, etc., because you're always trying to be better. A question would be like, where has that come from? That's the question.
Which is what I ask myself all the time.
Where do you think that's come from?
I've done a lot of work on myself around this anyway. Probably the most succinct answer I can give you is, it comes from my need to please others, to prove that I am worth something to them.
And where do you think that's come from? Because I think that is absolutely spot on. Where do you think that's come from?
Childhood. It comes from needing to prove to be accepted by parents or family, and especially like being Indian as well. Yeah, you're compared to everyone else around you. Right. So you get like 90% in a maths test, and you find out about your cousin who got 93%, and automatically you're compared, and you're like, that 3% difference makes you like terrible at maths, and someone else is amazing. So I think that's where it comes from.
I think you're spot on. That's where it comes from. And I think that I watched a video the other day, and it said, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was saying how if you have a kid and they, you know, do some painting, whatever, and they bring it home and say, "Mummy, look at me, I've done this great painting." What you shouldn't do is you shouldn't look at the painting and go, "Oh my God, this is beautiful, you're amazing," and then go, "Well done, you're amazing," and hug them. Because you've now told them, you've linked the painting, their ability to do this painting, with the love that you're giving to them. What you should do instead is go, this is fantastic. Let's put it up on the fridge. You put it up on the fridge and you turn around to them afterwards and go, I just want you to know I really love you. Separate. So you're separating out love from achievement. And I think that what a lot of us have been through is that love and achievement have been not purposely, but they've been combined. And as a result, we think that love is achievement. We need to achieve to be loved. That's, I think, where it comes from.
Yeah, that's it. I knew this conversation was going to be deep, but I do agree with that, and that's the issue. Because agreeing with it is fine, because I understand exactly where you're coming from, but the reality of trying to separate,
of course,
the need of receiving love, through achievement, is so insanely strong, which is what drives most people's actions. And but when I say most people, I'm talking about myself, like 100%, because I can see myself in everything that I do, looking for acknowledgement, appreciation, looking to be valued, all those things through what I've achieved, not because of who I am.
Well, yeah, but I think, I'm in the same boat. I think we're all in the same boat. This is probably an innate, like, human trait, is to be loved because you're doing something, you're contributing to something, rather than because of just understanding who you are. I think it's a hard one. A thought that I had the other day, which is it's a new thought to me. I've never thought this before, but I'll bring it out to you and see whether you agree. I thought to myself, do you think that we strive to be successful until we're filled up?
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is, by definition, the people who are, for the sake of argument, earning 30 grand a year, and they're happy and they're content, they felt no need to pass the barrier of 30 grand because they were content at 30. And the people who got 300, they had to get to 300 uncontented or discontented. And then at 300, they are now content. And the people that continue to strive and strive and strive, they're never content. So who's the happiest out of all these people? Who's the most content? The guy who got to 30. So, society values the people who have more money, but maybe, like, and it's just a thought that I'm having, like, maybe the people who have 30, or so the people who have 300 or 3 million or whatever, or who want more, are just discontent. And because they're discontent, like, that's the burden they have to bear. Yes, they get the money, but they also bear the burden of being discontent with their life. Whereas someone who's 30 grand, really content, the burden they have to bear is they don't have a huge amount of money, but they're content with that. They're happy with that.
The answer to that question
will be revealed after the break.
Will be exactly. And that's when we tune into the next podcast. No, the answer to that question is in the sentence itself, which is just the word contentment.
Yeah.
Because, look, whether you want to go for 30K, and there's no right or wrong here. If your goal's 15K, amazing. If your goal's 150K, great. And if your goal's 50 million, amazing. But, and this is where I think it comes down to, it doesn't actually matter what your goal is.
Yeah.
Are you content in the pursuit of the goal?
Yeah.
Rather than trying to hit the goal? Because if you're content in the pursuit of the goal, you will be happy.
Yeah.
Whether you've hit the goal or not, because your contentment comes from the pursuit and the actions you take every single day. And that goes back to what you were saying, which is, instead of trying to worry about which stepping stone you're at, which milestone you're at, are you doing the best you can today?
Yeah, I think, absolutely. I think that's a lot easier to understand once you're past the survival mode. In survival mode, it's so hard to, because you're just trying to survive, it's so hard to believe, oh, look, life's amazing and we're all connected and all that kind of stuff. And I'm so glad we got past that, because I could then see all of this stuff at that point.
Listen, when anyone's in survival mode, and I've been there multiple times myself, nothing's easy, nothing's great. I don't give a shit about motivation, personal development. Like, it doesn't mean anything. And
for me specifically, in that kind of mode, I become very selfish.
Yeah.
I think most people do. Become selfish, self-centered, and that's why I need to read this book to remind myself, hold on a second, we're not in survival mode. We can move on.
Yeah. And I think even to a degree, especially if you're in that space of life, you have to be selfish.
Yeah.
Because you, as fridge magnet as this is going to sound, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You just can't, right?
Yeah.
So then selfishness is actually the requirement to be selfless later on down the line.
Totally.
Because if you're drained, if you're in despair, if you're suffering through depression and you're pissed off and life's falling apart around you and you don't look after yourself, how can you expect to look after anything else or anyone else? It's going to be hard as fuck.
That's really enlightening. That is that the fact that it's a requirement to be selfish at those levels.
Yeah, I completely agree. But like, I think you have to live by that, because if you aren't, then there is very little to give to someone else, because you're not going to be coming from the space of contentment.
And don't you also see that like the universe, life, whatever, keeps giving you the lesson until you learn it? So there's people who, for example,
pain in the arse.
Yeah, but there's people who don't learn the lesson that they need to be selfish at those levels. They keep going through hardship and hardship and hardship, and then one day they become selfish and they're like, oh my God, like actually I became better. You know, I moved to the next level now, and now I don't have to struggle to survive anymore. But it is interesting how I think the universe just continues to give us the same problems, the same challenge, the same opportunities to solve challenges, I should say, until we learn the lesson.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the number of thoughts we have about something and our perceptions about something create those problems and repeated challenges.
Yeah.
And on that note, you recently, Krish pointed it out to me actually. She's like, you recently did a silent, a stint of like silence. For, like a retreat.
Yeah, it was a silent meditation retreat. It was I did it this year, the second time.
Wait, I'm curious, why is Jana laughing in the background?
because I'm not someone that normally stays silent. That's why.
So, okay, 2-part question to that, right?
Yeah.
Number one, why did you do it? And if you can summarize that experience into what the most powerful lesson was for you from that, what would you say?
So this retreat for me, and I'm not exaggerating, was life-changing for me. Life-changing. I mean, like, I talked earlier about being selfish, and I talked earlier about being abundant and all that stuff. And in that retreat, it's 10 days. It was hard, really hard. It was hard because not only can you not, so just to be clear, you can't talk, fine, but you can't read anything, you can't write anything, you haven't got your phone with you, you can't go anywhere, you're in the same space. Wow. And so it's really hard. But in that space, your brain starts to, and it's amazing, by the way, so we'll link it in the show notes, and I think people should go to it. And it's free, by the way. It's donation only, so once you've got the benefit, you can donate. In the first few days, you're like, what am I doing? And all these thoughts go through your head. And they take you through the program. Eventually, by around day 6 or day 7, it's a 10, 12-day retreat. By day 6 or day 7, everyone's got this kind of epiphany. And the epiphany is that we're all related. Now, we're talking about it right now, and we're saying, oh, yeah, you know, you're atoms, I'm atoms. But they're just words. Mm-hmm. We don't... we may even, like, cognitively get it, but we don't feel it. We get it, but we don't feel it. And through this process, you feel it. You feel like everything around you just melts away and is all the same stuff. And it was life-changing. I think what it did for me was it made me go from being selfish to being more selfless and abundant, and realize, and this is going to sound really silly, and I said it to myself this morning, and I was like, we should stop saying this. It makes me feel like I'm God, and these are my children. And when I say these, I mean everyone else. That means that when someone does something wrong, if you're a dad, people will know, you're a mum, you don't, if your kid steals £5 from your wallet, you don't slap your kid blue and black. You go, hold on a second. What's going on here? Why is this kid stolen £5? And you have a conversation and you try and work it out, because you're compassionate. You're going there with compassion. So I think what that retreat gave me was this element of compassion, of realizing that everyone's just walking their own journey. Everyone's learning their own lessons. This afternoon, we were agreeing a sale on a property, a purchase of a property. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to buy it at 85 grand. And the guy who was selling it to us, who was a sorcerer in the middle, he said, actually the price is 90. When we went to speak to the vendor, it was actually 85. So he was making 5k in the middle, which he hasn't told us about, which was a bit sneaky, underhanded. Yeah. I have no problem making people make money. Just tell me about it. I'm happy. You be transparent. And my deal negotiator, the guy who's gone out to view these properties and whatever, he's like, no, this guy screwed us over. We should tell him we don't want the property and da da da. And I'm like, fair enough. Like, he's made a mistake, but that's what it is. He's made a mistake. He's made a mistake in an error in judgment, and he's going to learn from this mistake, and he's going to become better as a result of that. But we don't need to like punish him because he's made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes all the time. I make mistakes all the time. So we just need to come at everything with an air of compassion and realize that everyone's just trying to live their life. And when I say, just to be clear, when I say I'm God and these are my children, I don't mean like I'm superior. I mean like everyone is God, but everyone needs to treat everyone else like they're your children, so that you can be compassionate to people and you can realize that everyone's just on their journey, and that, like you said, it's not that I'm better or you're better. We're just on different journeys. Imagine, an analogy. So I say, Dipesh, me and you are going to race. And you say, fantastic. Or imagine that we're in a race and we don't even talk about it. And
considering you've just run a marathon, I'm not joining you in this. So go on.
So I'm on a race and I'm going to run from, I don't know, say, or drive from London to Leeds.
Okay.
Right, there we go. But your race is you're cooking muffins. Our races are not connected at all, but we don't know that. I'm looking at Dipesh going, Dipesh is not succeeding because, you know, he's not even at Leicester yet. And Dipesh is looking at Shiv going, he's not even put his batter in the oven yet. We're in different races, like we're dancing different tunes. And I think this is the same for everyone in the entire world. Everyone's playing a different tune, and that's what, unfortunately, when you compare yourself to other people, you're comparing yourself to somebody else who's running a completely different race. And hopefully that analogy helps people to understand. When I say running a different race, I don't even mean run like physically running. I mean like one person's cooking and the other person's running or driving or whatever. It's completely different.
This is why that quote, comparison is the thief of joy, is so powerful, because you think you're comparing yourself to someone else, and yeah, they might be further ahead than you, which then makes you feel less than. But what if they're not even on the same race as you?
Yeah.
In which case a comparison is actually pointless, because it's giving you a false sense of failure.
Totally. Imagine the way you've described it also means that there is a one track, and that, you know, you all started at 0, you've got to get to 10, and one's at 6 and one's at 8. What if instead of being a linear like line like that, it's just a blob? And this blob is dented over here and this blob is dented over here, but they're just two blobs. How do you compare one blob to the other? They're just two blobs.
I've just never heard the word blob
so
much.
Yeah, blob. But what I'm trying to say is, like, it's not a linear comparison. There's so many different points. I'm sure you do as well. I look at people and I think, oh wow, like Dipesh has all these great qualities, and people look at me and they go, look at these great qualities. Look at my wife. Oh my God, there's great qualities. But these are all multifaceted. They're not just linear, and so, exactly like you're saying, you can't compare just one quality with the other one quality. Someone used to say to me, oh, I want to be like Ronaldo, for example. I want to play football. Oh, he's amazing at football. Yeah, if you want to be like him, you got to have the rest of his life as well, because he also has the stresses of like having all this money and deciding what to do with it, and the stresses of having the kids and all the other things that come in his life that you don't get to see. Mm-hmm. And as a result, another one of my I'm telling you a lot of my thoughts that I would never tell anybody. One of the thoughts I had ages ago, and it's always stuck with me, and this is going to be probably polarizing, is that everyone in their life suffers the same amount. This is going to sound crazy because some people are going through war and some people are having, millionaire lifestyles. Everyone suffers the same amount because suffering is relative. Like if you're wearing a tight pair of trousers, after a while, at the beginning it's a bit painful. After a while, you forget that they're a tight pair of trousers because you've got used to that. So likewise, if someone is, shackled in a prison, eventually that's just their life and they forget about the rest of it, and their suffering level actually decreases. So I think that, ultimately everyone's suffering level is the same, and we can't go, oh, we want that person's life, because the reason why we're saying that is because we perceive that they have less suffering in their life. But everyone has the same amount of suffering in their life.
That's an interesting concept, because even suffering itself is, and this is probably going to sound just as polarizing as what you've said. Suffering, happiness, contentment, sadness, all of those things, when you have a certain level of awareness, all of those things are actually choices. And that is not an easy pill to swallow for most people. And by the way, in no way or form am I saying I've overcome suffering or anything like that. I experience that shit all day, every day, for different reasons, whether it's in the pursuit of chasing something or feeling not good enough or whatever. But the ability to come back to, okay, it's my choice to see this life event as the way I'm seeing it, which is causing me pain, which I am then suffering for.
Yeah.
When you phrase it that way, it is a choice.
Yeah.
Because if that's how you're choosing to see it, well, then you also have the power and the ability to choose to see it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, saying it is way easier than doing it. And I have compassion for anyone going through any kind of suffering, but it is a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it ultimately comes down to, because it's the choices we make every day that will determine what we achieve overall.
So one of the things in this meditation retreat is you've got to sit cross-legged on the floor for basically 10 hours a day. It's a long time. I mean, if anyone's ever tried to like just sit on the floor, that's already painful.
I mean, I've got pins and needles after about 4 minutes.
Exactly. So. And for most people, after about 45 minutes, they're like, I need to move. So the whole purpose of this, by the way, is you sit for 10 hours and you don't move. Don't move. So obviously first day everyone's moving, shuffling and whatever, but it's really quiet as well in there. So anytime, like literally I used to say to my wife, like when someone wipes their nose like this, just that, everyone can hear it. When someone breathes out, you can hear it. So, you know, you're really mindful that no one's supposed to be moving, so you can't really move. And what they say is, what happened to me at least, I was sitting there and after about 45 minutes, start getting pain in my knees, pain in my back and all that stuff. And what the process tells you is, why don't you focus on that pain? Let's focus on it. Focus deeply. And with your mind, just with your mind, penetrate your flesh and go into that pain and find the pain with your mind. And now that you found it, just dissolve it, just explode it. And it sounds really like a crazy concept, but honestly, after you've done it, the pain goes away. It doesn't necessarily immediately go away, but it goes away. And this is the same, I think, concept as my mum used to say to me. I used to say to her, oh, my leg's hurting. She'd slap me. She goes, oh, is your leg hurting now? No, my cheek's hurting. Oh, great, your leg's not hurting anymore. It's because your focus has been taken elsewhere. And that's the same with, like you're saying with pain. I'm talking about physical pain here, that your focus can be taken away from that physical pain. You're talking about like physical pain, but perhaps even emotional pain. Like your focus can be taken away from that. And actually, when we say it can be taken away, what you're saying is you can take it away, that you're in control. And one of my, this is my top like favorite quote of all time. It says, life is 100% your responsibility. Plan accordingly.
I love that.
Life is 100% your responsibility. Plan accordingly. Because we all sit there and think, oh, we're not where we want to be because of this thing and that thing and all these things that happen to us, even if it's not someone else did it to us. Oh, my mum wasn't rich, or I didn't have that car, or this thing broke down, or whatever it was. No, like I'm creating this, and I've got to plan for the fact that these random things happen in life. And as soon as I change my mind, like you're saying, from these things are happening to me to, my car broke down. I wonder why my car broke down. This is interesting. Now, you may never know the answer to that, but for example, and we've seen this in films and stuff, that person's car broke down, therefore didn't get to the airport on time. They didn't take that plane crashed. Yeah. Steve Jobs has that great saying. He says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Yep. And building on what you just said, this is why the name of this podcast is called The Mindful Creator, because my understanding just through all the reading, the work that I've done over the last couple of years, is that nothing happens by accident and everything is a reflection of our consciousness in some way or form. So even if we're experiencing stuff that we don't like, that we don't want to have in our lives, it's not happening by accident. There's something within us that's attracting that situation. So I have one final question for you, which is, if you could go back to one point in your life to your younger self, and you're only allowed to go back to one point in time, what age would you go back to, and what one piece of advice would you give yourself?
You know, because I have a business, I have to say that the answer is when I first started buying properties, and I tell myself to buy more properties, because honestly, like even now, at any point in time, if you ask anybody that's ever bought properties, they wish they had bought more properties when they bought their first property.
Yeah.
Because we all know that properties back, I just said to you, the properties back then were 65 grand. Guess how much they are now? Like 165 grand. I wish I bought 10 more at that time.
Yeah.
So your question is, if I could go back to any point in my life, where would I go? Which point, which age would I be?
What age would you go back to, and what one piece of advice would you give yourself?
I think at that, when I was younger, when I was kind of like in school and stuff, I remember just thinking that like the world was like against me. Everything was happening against me. And I wish I could like just tell myself, it's going to be okay. Like, instead of, in fact, there's that other saying, it says something along the lines of like, you should learn to surf the wave. I wish I could just learn to surf the wave, and I wish I could tell that kid, like, stop fighting everything that's happening. Just like you said, find the silver lining and surf the wave, and then you'd be just, the same stuff would happen, but you'd be happier. You'd be more content. You'd be less worried. You'd be less, stressed, ultimately.
Love it. Shiv, absolute pleasure to have you on, and one hell of a conversation. Got a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be as well, which I absolutely loved. Thank you so much for being here.
This is honestly like one of the really great conversations that I've had, because of the fact that it's got deep. And I always say all the time, like, I really don't like, just in normal conversations as well, I don't like surface level conversations. Oh, where are you going on holiday? No one cares where we're going on holiday. I care about where I'm going. You care about where you're going. I don't care where you're going.
Guarantee now 5 people are like, where is he going on holiday?
Yeah. But the point is, like, when we get deep and we, I think we really get to learn about ourselves, learn about the other person, and understand more about ourselves through the conversation we're having. A lot of the stuff that I've said on this podcast, as I said to you, I've had these thoughts. I've never said them to anybody, because I'm like, suffering's the same for everyone. I can't say that to people, because, people are dying in the world. Yeah. There's a lot of suffering. So yeah, I really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.